like a little bit during the session so that you get an opportunity to um, kind of reflect on sculpture. Okay. And I'm telling you right now, this is one of my favorites. Uh, this is, I'm going to mute just a little bit. Let me pull this back up where I don't, all right. I've got to adjust my screen. If y'all give me 1 minute to do it. So I know what okay. This is Mr. Rodin, and he is one of the most celebrated sculptors of the modern age. Probably every museum that you go into, really worldwide famous museum that you go into, you're going to see a sculpture by this fellow. Even private collections across the globe. He worked across a lot of media. He was a fine artist, which we'll talk about in a minute. And he was also an author. He wrote beautiful prose. He wrote several books. And he worked in terracotta. He worked in plaster. He worked in bronze and marble. I say he worked. The people that he assigned the work to worked in those, but he was the creator. And he was incredibly during this age. Okay, I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you who one of his best friends was. One of his best friends was Monet. So they all during this age with the Impressionism, and they kind of formed friendships. And because of this, they were destructuring, and they were looking at art in a different way, as we found out with looking at these artists. And he, though, in his sculpture, pushed against and beyond all the traditional ways of looking at art, like your classical, the ones that you see, the Greek and the Roman sculptures, and the sculptures of the people in squares, monuments. Rodin's, you're going to see, is pushing against all of that. So the Art at Noon program sponsors an art walk. We've sponsored 2 out of country, which would be Florida. Okay, so we sponsored one in New York City, and we've sponsored one in Washington, D.C. In October, we're sponsoring another one, and our designated city is Philadelphia. So all of the Art at Noon programs that we will be having through up until the 18th of October are going to be centralized and focusing on the art that we will see, or we will be exposed to, or we will drive by in Philadelphia. And especially the museums. We're going to be visiting the Philadelphia Museum of Art. That's going to be one of our top museums to visit. But the other one is going to be the Rodin Museum. And that's the one we're going to focus on today. And I have a little short video for all of you that may be contemplating going with us. And those of you that are not, it's just a really good overview of this particular museum. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that technology works. And let's see.
This is John Immervar. Today we're going to visit the Rodin Museum, a satellite of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, just down the parkway next to the Barnes Foundation. This jewel box of a museum is dedicated to the sculpture of Auguste Rodin. Of course, you'll want to go into the museum, but some of the most iconic Rodin sculptures are in the museum's beautiful garden, which is always open. So you can see these works anytime, even like today during a pandemic when the museum is closed. When you come to the museum, the first thing you'll see is this gate with several sculptures, including Rodin's most famous sculpture, the Thinker. You might be asking, why do we have a museum dedicated just to Rodin? To answer that, I'll contrast the Thinker with another statue done almost at the same time by another French sculptor. You might recognize it. Lady Liberty. She's Libertas, a Roman goddess of liberty, and the spikes around her head are like a halo, indicating her divinity. Her face is classic, noble, unmoving. Her torch illuminates the path to liberty, and she carries a tablet with the date of the Declaration of Independence. In case you missed the theme of liberty, she has broken bondage chains at her feet. It's a great statue, but it isn't subtle. It's noble, classic, and makes a single powerful statement. Now, let's look at the thinker. He isn't a Roman god or a military hero. He has no identifying clothing or marks at all. His hands are the hands of a working man. He has massive muscles, but he didn't get them from working out at a gym. He's every man, and everything here is dynamic. His toes are clenched as though he's about to jump up. If you're sitting down, try this. Put your right elbow on your left thigh. It's an awkward pose, like a coiled spring. And he's searching. Maybe he's looking for an answer, or maybe he's still looking for the question. Compared to Lady Liberty, he is not static, but restless, not a goddess, but a worker. This statue is not a statement, but an unsettling question. That's the genius of Rodin. Now, here's another question. We have a thinker in Philadelphia, and there's another one in Paris at the Rodin Museum there, and several others around the world. So is the Philadelphia thinker a real Rodin, or just a copy? It's a real Rodin, but to understand that, we have to recognize that there are two main ways to make sculptures. Some sculptures are made by carvers. They work with stone, like marble, and use chisels to carve into the stone, like Michelangelo. And the piece that the artist carves is the original, and anything else is a copy. But if you look around Philadelphia, most of the statues are made of metal, like Joan of Arc here. And they're not made by an artist, but cast in a foundry by metal workers. These metal statues are usually made by modelers who build up a sculpture from clay. The details are really complicated, but here's a very general idea of what happens to turn a clay model into a metal sculpture. Using molds, skilled artisans turn the clay original into a plaster of Paris replica. In the process, the original clay model that the artist actually touched is destroyed. From the plaster of Paris version, metal workers make molds to cast a bronze version of the statue. But the plaster of Paris is not destroyed in the process, so additional bronze versions can be made. But only a very limited number of authorized Rodin sculptures using the same complex process of casting are allowed to be made. So the Paris version and the Philadelphia version are both authorized Rodins, even though the Philadelphia version was cast after Rodin's death. They're like two prints made from the same negative. Now, we'll see how Rodin used the ability to make multiple versions in a very creative way. For example, next to the thinker, in a niche on the gate, is a sculpture sometimes called the Shade. He's a heavily muscled man like the thinker, and notice that his body is posed like a classical, ancient, or Renaissance statue in what's called contrapposto, with one knee bent and the other straight. But breaking dramatically with classical tradition, Rodin has slanted the head to the side in a physically impossible posture, as though he's carrying a heavy burden that is literally crushing him. Another name for this figure is the slave, which relates well to the idea of a massive burden. Rodin often makes his figures anatomically exaggerated to heighten their effect. Now, keeping that figure in mind, walk toward the museum itself and go around to the left side, and you'll see this remarkable grouping. As you look at it in more detail, you'll see how Rodin created it. He put together three identical versions of the shade to make a group known as the Three Shades. Assembling multiple works to make a new grouping is a technique that Rodin uses frequently to great effect, as you see here. With the three shades together, the sculpture takes on a new meaning. In addition to suggesting a crushing burden, it evokes the idea of solidarity, and the three arms form a dramatic downward arrow, as though pointing to something below. Now, let's see how the sculpture of three shades evolved. walk back to the entrance of the museum and walk up the steps to see Rodin's famous Gates of Hell. Rodin worked on it for almost 40 years. He called it his Noah's Ark, since many of his most important pieces started out as smaller versions on the gates. For example, at the top you'll see a smaller version of the three shades. Now their downward-pointing arms focus our attention on what's going on below. Immediately below the three shades is a smaller version of the thinker, now understood as the poet Dante, who created through his thought the vision of hell that we'll see below. Look around. There are over 200 figures. These panels are a whole museum in themselves, and many of Rodin's larger statues are based on the smaller figures you see before you. For our last work, go down the stairs and cross to the other side of the museum to see the Burghers of Calais, a work commissioned by the French town of Calais to celebrate a famous moment in the town's history. There's a story here. In 1347, the town was besieged by English forces. The citizens were starving and wanted to surrender. The English king, Edward III, said he would accept their surrender if 6 of their leading citizens, called burghers, would come to him prepared to die, in rags with ropes around their necks and with the key to the city. So the 6 citizens came forward, but to their surprise, the English queen had mercy on them, and they were spared. The people of Calais probably expected something that focused on a single noble figure, perhaps in a pyramid shape, like this Chinese statue celebrating the heroism of Chinese workers. The officials of Calais were shocked, however, when Rodin gave them not a heroic statue, but a group of 6 men all of the same height, all facing in different directions. Here's the Philadelphia version. Rodin began, of course, by making separate statues of each man, and there are authorized versions of the individual men at museums around the world. So let's start by looking at the separate statues. This figure is probably what the good people of Calais expected. He's brave, showing no fear as he walks calmly to his death. Now, let's look at some of the others. Typically of Rodin, they're each powerfully expressive. Here's a very old man, emaciated from the siege, suggesting perhaps that he goes to his death thinking that he has not long to live. But here's a younger man. We can almost hear him saying, "Yes, it's good that you older men are sacrificing yourself, but why me? I have my whole life before me." Another figure has his hand across his face, as though to shield himself from the blows that he expects. Meanwhile, another figure is clearly terrified. He doesn't want to die. Now, come back to the group. The individuals are remarkable, but taken together, they are not a statement of heroism, but a conversation of different perspectives on death. That's Rodin's contribution, to create powerful figures that raise questions and challenge our preconceptions, images that are expressive and even exaggerated, rather than traditionally beautiful and lifelike. So come to the Rodin anytime. Bring your lunch, sit in the garden, and enjoy some of the world's greatest sculptures.
And that is where we will be going.
And if you like this video, subscribe to my channel or
that's where we will be going on our faith, liberty, art, and architecture tour in October. We will start probably with Rodin. So now you've had a little overview of the museum and what in the outside of it. We didn't go in. That's for us to do in October and kind of poke around. But it's an absolutely marvelous museum. Let's take a look. Just a little bio, just a little more in-depth bio of Rodin. First of all, he comes from a poor family. His father was a police clerk, and his mother, I think, was a seamstress of some sorts. And it was not maybe probably middle class, lower middle class, but they really encouraged. They saw that he had a talent, and they encouraged him. They even sent him away to school. But a lot of biographers believe, because he was not able, he loved art, he loved the ability to draw, and there was a talent there and people could see it. And even though he tried 3 or 4 times to get into the big sculpture school in France. He was denied those 3 times, and he ended up going to a lesser one. We'll talk about that in a minute. And a lot of the biographers feel like it was probably he was short-sighted, and and maybe even dyslexic. Some biographers said that. When he was a child, he was always sketching what he saw, and he liked drawing. It was a way for him to pause and to look at the natural world around him. And even though he was a sculptor, he continued drawing throughout his entire life and career. And one of the drawing styles that he used was called, and I think this is really relevant to how we look at his art as his art. One of his styles that he used was called blind drawing. And I imagine if you've ever had an art class or an art teacher, that is one of the first things they say, just look at the thing, don't look at the paper, and blindly draw what you see. And this is what, with this method, and I think I believe as we go through and we look at his work, you're going to see that method in his artwork. I mean, I think it's going to become his sculpture. He was able to capture a form and a sense of motion with that blind drawing, which was natural. It's an extremely natural way to draw. And the idea for him was that he wanted the essence of a subject. It was more important to him to the details. Now, all of my buddies that have been with me through this journey, and we have discussed artists, I know that you're probably perking up right now and say, oh my gosh, that sounds kind of familiar. Maybe like a Van Gogh or a Degas or a Monet or a Manet. And that's exactly right. This was the period that we're breaking out of the mold. And he had surrounding him, he had a group of, once he became famous, world renowned, and he was really, I would say, he was a self-made sculptor, because he knew, he began to see that how he could market this, and he became extremely capable in marketing his product. And his studio grew. He hired artists and sculptors to, he just merely created the work, and then they took it to the next step, as you saw in the film. And this girl here on the left is an interesting lady. She's 18-year-old Claudel. Her last name was Claudel. And even though, interesting thing about Rodin, he met a woman, a seamstress, who he fell madly, passionately in love with, and never married her. Well, I'm sorry, he did marry her. He married her a week before he died. And they had a 53-year living together in close harmony. And along that 53-year, probably one of the reasons is Rodin was extremely interested in ladies, and this was one of them. And those of you, I just love it when history and things come together. Her last name is Claudel, and her brother was the minister, an ambassador. And the only reason I know that is that Tim Toller and I are going to do a Zoom talk about Marcel Dupree and Paul Cabal. Paul Cabal was this gal's brother. Now, she was the mistress of Rodin, and very young. And she began and she's quite beautiful sculptress, quite capable. And we'll look up, I hope we get to see some of her work. I'm hoping that the Rodin Museum has some. And she became kind of paranoid that, first of all, he wasn't marrying her. And second of all, she felt like she was perhaps doing all the work, and being a sculptress at her own age, she thought Rodin was not accepting of her and her work. And she became, they put her in a mental institution where she died. And her brother, who is the poet that we're going to hear the 14 Stations of the Cross poetry for on Good Friday, was one of the ones that kept her in this institution. So that's just how history kind of, pops up and has connections. This Rodin sculpture was a blend of the traditional and the new process. He began each one of his sculptures by first creating a model out of either clay, wax, or plaster of Paris, and he could produce multiples in these inexpensive mediums, and then he could hold them in reserve for future use in compositions. He often cut his compositions and the model of his once he had modeled the whole figure, he often cut it apart, which you're going to see. And then he would recombine hands and legs and torsos and heads to alter a composition and create a completely new and different work of art. After the models were completed, he worked with many assistants, which we just saw a picture of in his studio. And all of them, there were experts in various materials. Some of them were experts in marble, some in bronze, and they were used to create that final full-fledged sculpture. They used his clay models that he created either as a reference if they were carving marble, or they used them for casts. This is one of my favorites coming up. Now, in this sculpture, Rodin decides not to present the fragment as a bust, which he did a lot, okay? Which would, with this is the beheading of St. John, which is what he would normally do, take this, and he did it with John. This is, but to set the head, and this here is a baptismal font. Okay, let me see if I can zoom in on this. Okay, this is the baptismal font. All right. So he sets this head on a baptismal font, and this to him established a greater reference to the biblical account of John the Baptist, and to separate it from the rest of the fragment, which is one of his famous ones called the walking man, which is a man walking and he has no head. And that particular sculpture had been just stripped of all religious things, the walking man. Okay, so when he decided to separate this sculpture, it was based on strong criticism that it received. He realized that he could imbue gestures in several discrete instances, beginning with separating a head from the rest of the body. And some people, some biographers and authors have said that this gives several examples of Rodin's achievement of stopping time as a counter statement to the usage of a gesture. So take a look at this one. I'd like for you to kind of look at them. The two thing, the peace, perhaps the peace signal. This is another way of him taking things that he had, sculptures that he had, and fragmenting them. You'll notice that many of his sculptures, as I said, are incomplete portions of a human body. It could be just the bust of a person, or hands, or a torso. And this was in defiance of the tradition of the time, where a work was often considered, only considered complete if it was the whole body. So here's Rodin going around chopping off parts of his sculpture or creating parts of his sculpture, and everybody said, "Oh my cow, this is not good." But what Rodin was interested in, and let me see if I can zoom in on this. Yeah. What Rodin was interested in is creating energy and emotion through a fragment. He would even take, as I said, a fragment from one sculpture and then combine it with a fragment from another sculpture. so that that we could discover a different kind of form and a different kind of expression. The other thing Rodin was interested in was expressing human emotions through his work. He often broke from convention by representing people around him. Now, this was different. You know, everybody thinks,
Recording in progress.
But this was different. Somebody needs to mute their microphone if they would, please. Thank you. He often broke from convention by representing people around him instead of models. And some of his sculptures looked unfinished compared to his contemporaries. And even if you look closely at this one, if I can zoom in and get it going for you, you can see that in the sculpture itself, it's not polished. This is not polished at all. This particular piece was commissioned for him, commissioned for him to sculpt. He also showed the whole body, sometimes in different positions, and even the sculptured form in a different position. This is kind of, look at her, her head's down. She's not looking straight at you. You don't see any arms, you don't see any legs. You just are looking at her and giving an essence of her. And that was what he was hoping to. Anyway, now we're going to go to his famous one. Everybody knows this one. All right. As it's said in the video, this was a part of his biggest work, which was the Gates of Hell, which we'll talk about in a minute or two. And this particular piece, which is now called The Thinker, if you remember from the video, was sitting up on the door, and it was looking down, posed over, looking down, with all of these 200 figures writhing in agony and hell. Okay. This was purportedly, could have been Dante, because he was the poet looking over and reflecting on his work. Some people have, there's been different kinds of reasons for this particular thing, this particular one, and why he put it at the top and who it was and why he put it there. But let's take a little bit closer look as we go through this one, because this is just awesome. All right. This particular one, the figure Rodin has said was symbolic of the modern secular man. He was greatly influenced by Michelangelo. His sculpture, he went on a trip in an early age before he really was really gung-ho in, I guess you would say, into sculpture. He took a trip to Italy and just was fascinated by Michelangelo. In this figure, you see a man that is strong in mind and body, but lonely perhaps, doubtful. The position he's created for himself is he's master perhaps of his own universe. Now, although he's seated, he's lost in this deep thought. And even seated, and when you see this, when you get up close and see it, there's still movement in this. This is what is so wonderful about Rodin, is how he is able to create the emotion, but also movement, even in a seated posture. You can't tell it really well because it's this flat process here. This is a dynamic pose, and at first it kind of, when you first see it, it looks, oh my gosh, it's just kind of natural. Somebody just kind of leaning and thinking. But from the video that we saw, he asked you to do this pose. And when you do it yourselves, you realize that it's not a natural pose at all. The man's right arm is on his left. The knee is twisted down here. If you'll take a look at the knees are twisted. He has a knitted brow that, of reflection. His nostrils are distended. His lips are compressed. And every muscle, look at this, every muscle in his back, in his legs, all the way down to his feet are clenched. Okay. So it creates effect. What it does is it creates an effect of just utter absorption, absolute self-absorption, with all the straining soldiers and the curved back and the pulsing veins. It 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 sends the message to us that this is a total effort. What he is doing is a total effort, and everything, every part of his body, is involved in trying to resolve perhaps a difficult problem. And perhaps that's the reason he was sitting on top of the gates of hell saying, please, I want to go down there. I don't know. But anyway, it suggests that. The next one. Now we're going to spend a few minutes on this one because this is my favorite. When I first saw the Burghers of Calais was at the Met, and they have done the most marvelous. They have placed this. When you go to the Met, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, run and take a look at this, because the setting that they have placed it in is absolutely phenomenal. They have it's downstairs, it's in the hall, the sculpture halls, but they have placed it in front of these 45 feet, 100 feet windows looking out. So if you go at different times of the year, which the last 20 years, that's where I go. And for 20 years, I've been going and looking at this in all seasons, spring, winter, summer, and fall. And every time you go, you see something different, and the environment that it's placed in causes a different motion. The one that I still remember is we went in at Christmas time, and it was snowing in the background on these windows. And if you can capture that feeling, it's amazing. But let's just review a little bit about the story. There's 100-year wars. Philip and France and the King of England were battling. The King of England was starving the town of Calais to death. There was nothing. And Philip was saying, hang on in there. So then William sends a message and says, okay, I'm going to let everybody live, but I have a proposition. You send the councilmen out, you put ropes around their necks, you dress them in sackcloths, and I will behead them, and I will let this town survive. 6 men volunteered for this. 6 men. This is actually a true story. 6 men volunteered for this, to be the lambs going to the slaughter. And the happy ending is that the queen, was pregnant at the time, and she didn't want anything. Actually, with the 100-year wars was bad enough, but this was so monumental, she felt like it would affect the birth of her baby. So these men were allowed to survive. But I want us to take a closer look at this, because when we go to the Rodin, or if you go to the Met, or any of the others that we've been able to cast this, you have to look at it closely, and we're going to real fast. Well, maybe not so fast. I want you to, the faces of each one of these men, I want you to look at the eyes. Okay. Look at the mouth. Look at the way he formed the details in the ear, the veins. We're going to get up closer, but look at the expression. How does one go about creating expressions in sculptures? The pietà, okay, that's beautiful. How do you go about doing it? It's marvelous. These men have offered themselves up. Each one of them, as we're looking, has a different expression. As the video pointed out, dissolution, inner turmoil. It was not the heroic thing in the town square that you see on the standing straight and tall, ready to meet, ready to charge forth and meet death. Not this statue. not this statue. And it wasn't, as he said, in the pyramid form, like most of the monuments are. Look at this. Absolute dejection. Look at that. Rodin, as we will talk about, was a master of sculpting hands, and lots of the things are hands. Look at the hands on this, and look how he's holding it. The utter, even though you cannot see the eyes, if you did that, and I've tried to do all of these poses, but if you do that pose, the absolute feeling, that's one of just complete utter dejection. Notice the veins in the hand, and notice they're not limp by any means. Everybody hold your hands up like that. Look at that. I mean, he captured that, he captured that. And here's the face of the one we look at. I can't believe this is happening. There is a famous Vietnam photograph that went around during Vietnam, went around the world, of a bombing, and it could have been napalm, and a whole community is rushing out away from it. And this particular expression is on so many of the people that are coming out of that bombing. What is going on? I can't believe this. Is this happening to me? And as you can see from the back, notice the shoulders, and notice, I mean, it's just a dejection. Oh, now up close and personal. Take a look at this. And when we get there, I mean, look at your hand and look at this. When you do like that, he got it. Do your hands this way and look. That's what I love to do with Rodin. I like to modeling. And you know what? Rodin made deformity interesting and compelling. A lot of his hands are deformed. And if you look at them, they're beautiful. Even the feet as they trod. Look how he did with the toes and the feet, that pressing into that dirt. No, I don't want to go. It's just kind of, and there you are. You're walking with them. Ah, you know what this is? And this is the rope that was around their neck. They were in sackcloths, and that is what William said. Dress them in sackcloths, put a rope around their necks, tie them together, send them to me. Tell me, how did he capture that look of, I've got to do this. I have to do this. The clenched teeth, the nostrils flared, the dejection and the wariness in the eyes, and the hands. So that was the Burgers of Calais. Now this one we're going to saw the picture. This is the one that he worked on for 40 years and never completed. He was commissioned to do this Gates of Hell, and this is considered to be what they call the magnum opus, the big thing of his life. He, as the video said, he was very much taken with Dante and Dante's Divine Comedy, and Dante in his Divine Comedy, he really describes hell. And Rodin was commissioned to do this by the Minister of Art, and they were going to do a new museum. And this is what they wanted. They wanted this marvelous door that would be the entry to this museum. And he went to a baptistry in Florence and saw, I believe it was the gates of Paris, the gates of paradise. And that gave him I think he had started on the door itself, but using and looking at the gates of paradise, it was really kind of started his plans for the gates of hell. When he did this, he said, I want complete autonomy. And they gave it to him. And as you can see, some of the figures, let me see if I can get up. Let me zoom in. I think some of the figures that, remember the shades that we saw? Here are the shades. Remember there, it's the same figure, but turned different ways. Here is this is the thinker, or it could be Dante and this. And now you see where it was positioned in the door itself. It was positioned on top. And then all of these are these over 200 figures of people writhing in agony, except for two. And we'll talk about those at the end. There's always there's an end of the story, but there were two that were not really writhing in hell, and we'll discuss that in a minute, few minutes, okay? But let me get I'll get you some close-ups of some of these. Now, these are small figures, not small, but they're not large figures. But I want you to get an idea of up close and personal, because sometimes we don't get, these were on the top. And one of the things that really bothered me about this one, and I didn't take a lot, was he used children in hell, babies. And it's been a long time since I read Dante's Divine Comedy. I mean, long, like 50 years. And I said I'd never go back and read it again, but I just wondered if there was anything in, this is a better picture of the top of the sculpture. He had planned and didn't do it. I read where he planned to put a statue or a sculpture of Adam on one side and Eve on the other. And we're gonna talk about that in a minute. That did not end up in the door. But as I said, he worked on this thing. It was never complete. And then he would pull things off of the door, ideas off of the door to use in his other sculptures. This one is so you can get an idea of how he could get. How do you get motion in stone, boys and girls? Look at that. Look at the motion in that. Notice the hand. And look, let's follow it up. Let's progress it up. Is it Satan? And as you can see, the detail in the work. But yet, there's such detail, and yet with the casting of this thing, everything flows, and it looks like it's coming out of molten rock, giving you that almost that burning and that moving and that sense of agony. This one is particularly interesting because I want you to look at the expression here. Look. Each of these pieces, as you look at this door, all of the ones that you can realize have different expressions of some sort, just like we saw with the Burghers of Calais. Okay, next up. This is called the Cathedral. Now, I want you to look at it just because I think you have to look at art yourselves. This is called Cathedral. And it is his sculpture of two right hands. They're two right hands. He believed in the power, the expressive power. Now, and I'm going to say that again, the expressive power of every aspect of human anatomy. And because of that, that led him to some really radical experiments. And you're looking at one right now. Ah, thank you. We have someone that is formulating. Thank you. This sculpture depicts the two right hands, but if you will notice, and I'm going to turn it over here. Let me see if I can zoom up. Not here. They're barely touching each other. Look at that, guys. Look, you know, just the tips. They're barely touching each other. It's similar to two hands coming together in prayer. He could take this subject. He could take a subject, his two hands, and he could create this expressive sculpture. This is two right hands that are touching each other as if in prayer. And what he's doing is trying to encourage you as the viewer, He's trying to encourage you to look at this and to think about that relationship. Think about that relationship. Who were these two people? How were they returned in order to get that position? What was the form? It's this was originally, now this particular one in Rodin was originally carved in stone. But I want you to look at it now. That is kind of a plaster or a stone look. Let's look at it. And this is the one that is going to be in the Rodin in Philadelphia. They have the bronze one. And let me zoom in just a little bit and let you take just a look at it. It's just magnificent. The way it turns, the feelings that it evokes. And this was his inspiration, I guess you'd say, or it had to be. The building, the French Gothic buildings. The sculpture was really originally called the Ark of the Covenant. And he wrote a book. It was after he published a book on cathedrals, he renamed it. This form of sculpture demonstrates his interest in Gothic architecture as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. And if you'll look in the how it's vaulted, and there is a name for this, and my architect is muted. He could probably tell me, Grady could probably tell me what the name of this is. But there is a name of this particular vaulting. It starts with an R, and I've forgotten what it is. But look at that. Same feel, right? Okay, good one coming up here. We're going to kind of look at this one a little bit. This is called the Hand of God. And this was Rodin's attempt to compare the art of sculpting with the divine art of creation. It depicts a right hand, right here, zoom in on it for you. It depicts a right hand emerging from the earth, holding a block of clay. Here's your block of clay. Here's your block of clay. Holding a block of clay from which two figures. Now I've got better. Here's the legs of one. All right, follow me here. And then this is another one wrapping around this way. Here's the arms of one person. Here's the head, and here's so you can kind of see it a little bit better. It's a block of clay from which two figures, Adam and Eve, are being modeled. And Rodin said of this piece that when God created the world, it is of modeling. He must first have thought of art. It was originally modeled in clay, and the marble virgin carried a technical and really symbolic significance. So let's look at another side of it. Now, let me push this up. This is another side so that you can kind of, all right, see the hand coming up this way, okay? The body's back this way, legs, and the clay. This is magnificent. This sculpture represents Rodin's interest in using a part to represent a whole, like using a hand to represent an entire person. And it also pays homage to Michelangelo's work because you can see strong images of that. And this is the other side. I tried to get all of the sides for you so that you could kind of get an idea. Oh gosh, guys, when we look at this, we're just going to be so excited. Say, look at this hand, guys. Okay. Reaching up out of the universe, taking that clay and molding humans. Rodin decided, like the Impressionists, Rodin hated, despised, I think would be a good word, the finished work. You know, Impressionists didn't really. He wanted to leave, and this is what this whole Art at Noon is about. This is why we established it as the program, is to work with people who cannot create Rodins and cannot create artwork to sell or whatever, but who can appreciate it. And by appreciating it, kind of understand, because once you appreciate something, it takes hold of your body and your soul and your life, and it takes on a different realm. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to leave something into the imagination of who's looking at it. Each one of us right now, I bet, is interpreting something different about this particular piece, this work. I guarantee you, you're going to see something, whether it reflects, if you're an artist yourself and are you studied in Humanities 101 at Texas Women's University, like I did, and you may have seen this work. And I will imagine, because I've seen it every time I see it, just like with the Burgers of Calais, I see something different. To the average public, though, when they first viewed this, because you didn't have the whole body and it wasn't, God standing there lifting Adam and Eve maybe on one hand, and it was just, you could take a picture of it and you knew exactly what it was. There was commentaries at the time that it was lazy, that he just cut the hand off and just had it, or he was selling parts of stuff and making money out of it. There was another one. To them, the artistic perfection still meant that everything should be neat and polished. And he said, no. He said, just like Rembrandt said, that his right was to declare a piece of art finished when he had reached the artistic aim. And that's kind of high level talk, but if you, as we've progressed through looking at his pieces so far, I think you perhaps can begin to see that just a little bit. Okay, we're gonna look now. This is Eve. This is the one I said that he had these two towering sculptures, and he was going to put Adam on one side and Eve on the other side of the doors, the gates of hell, and to flank that doorway. And this is because, as he said, he wanted them to be perpetual witnesses to the consequences of their sin and the damnation of souls. Now let's look at Eve. When you first look at her, it's just a sculpture. But then as we delve deeper into looking at her and her body, notice how he's positioned her. the humped shoulders, the grabbing of herself. It's her face in prison. It's a gesture of anguish. These were commissioned, and we're going to talk about that. The holdings of all of Rodin's work, he made a deal with the French government. He liked this hotel that he was staying in, and they were going, this is a simple, I'm giving you the simple stuff, and they were demolishing it. So he made a deal with the French government not to demolish it, to use it as a museum. He in turn would turn over everything to them, all of his casts, his artwork, and everything. So they formed a trust, basically, and all of the original cast, and in the video, they were talking about how these casts were made, you know, the original, so forth. And I believe he left, in his will how many casts that could be made of each specific object that he left, or each specific thing. And this is one of them that was. Well, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, bought one of these casts. So this is an original of the original, if that makes any sense. Okay. One more shot of the anguish of Eve. Okay, it's your turn to talk. Just a few minutes before we end this thing up. This is Rodin's sculpture, and it is called Ecclesiastes. So my ministers that are sitting around and my biblical scholars that are sitting around, this is what he entitled it. To give you an overview, just a really quick summary of the overview of Ecclesiastes, I'm not going to, but we'll come back to that. But I want to ask you a couple of questions, and raise your hand if you would be so kind to join in the conversation. Just a few questions. When you go and you look at sculpture, or you look at any piece of art, to me, in order to appreciate it, you got to kind of stand there and think about it. And I know there's such a thing as museum overload. And that is the reason that I am doing, and I did it for New York City, our trip for New York City and our trip for Washington, D.C. It's because if you can see a piece of art that appeals to you, then when you go to that specific museum, you're going to either look for the artist, or you're going to look for that specific work of art. Because I will guarantee you, in the Met and the National Gallery and the Philadelphia, there's such a thing in Home Depot. It's Home Depot overload all of a sudden, you know, and Lowe's, you stand in there with all of that stuff around you, and you just, you start breathing deeply. It's the same in a museum. So, and there is such a thing as museum fatigue. So when you go into a museum, if you've got an idea of what you want to see, or a piece of art that just really you got up close and personal with, go to it and look at it. Well, this one I really want to see, because there's a bit of a mystery about it. Why did he do it? So first of all, will someone tell me what you see? Just open up your mics and just comment on what you see. Let's talk about that first. What do you see? Beth, open that mic and tell me what you see. You knew I was going to call on you, you teacher. What do you see?
It kind of looks like someone just waking up to me, stretching and waking up, or almost like an infant pose.
Okay. But what do you see, Beth? Tell me everything you see in that picture.
Oh, I see a big contrast between smooth, finished surfaces and rough surfaces.
Okay. Good. All right. What else do you see? What objects do you see?
The book.
A book.
And
Okay.
pages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like the pages maybe be unraveling here. Right? It's a kind of a unique position, isn't it? Beth, do you think you could get on the floor and do that position?
Yeah, hang on. Also, it appears to be a female to me. But the face and the hands and feet are much more unfinished than the rest of the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, Angela Burton, I'm going to call on you now. Open up your mic, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Oops.
Angela, What do you like about this, or what do you not like about this?
Well, I've never, can you hear me? I don't know whether I did it right.
Yeah,
Let's
you
see.
got it. We hear you fine.
Okay. All right. Um, I've never seen a sculpture where someone's coiled up like that. Um, and I don't remember what Ecclesiastes is all about, but it looks like he's on a shell to me, like a baptismal shell.
Yeah, we're back to that. Let me pull that
Yeah.
out. I was trying to pull up the other one. Let me pull down through those. Get the one. Yeah, because let's do this one. I think this one is, yeah, let's take that. Let me move over so I can get back up to my full screen again.
Oops.
Okay, let's take a look at it like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether that's like the mat or just it's just taking that form to me. And is it somewhat a sense of torture to, I don't know.
Good bit, good bit.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We're gonna have to, you hit the wrong thing. That's the pointer option. See if we can remove them. Bring that arrow. Nope. Okay. Angela, see if you can remove your hidden, yeah, see if you can get rid of those little marks for me. You hit a button,
Oh,
okay?
oh, okay.
All
Oh,
right.
ooh, I don't
See,
know what I did. Okay, I see what you're saying.
you're drawing all over my work.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. So now the next one, this is probably one of his most famous ones. And this is the one that is in the Victorian Albert have the original from it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
So that's the thing that you have to do when you approach. And let's go back just really fast to that one, because I did want to tell you a little bit about what the notes say. We always get we always have to have a, all right, here we go. Okay, in Ecclesiastes, it was the book Ecclesiastes, I believe, and Linda, I want you to correct me on everything, because this was just cursory reading and remembering from Sunday school, but was written by a so-called preacher. And the preacher was supposed to be Solomon. So, and he was reflecting on his experiences. And the quote that you're probably all familiar with is vanity. Everything is vanities. He was looking back, Solomon was looking back on his life, or the preacher was looking back on his life, and realized that he had everything, but the things that were important was not riches and glory. And so he was kind of taking a reflective journey backwards. Having said that, does anybody have any comments that they want to make? Has any of you seen this, number one? If any of you seen this sculpture anywhere, maybe in, do you have any ideas? Anybody have any ideas on it? Catherine, you didn't see this one, did you? You don't remember it? Well, you were in love. So Catherine got engaged in Paris and went over to the museum. And she vaguely remembers that they went to the big one, but and this, of course, is this famous one. And again, when he showed this, everybody rioted. He was not allowed to show it in the Salon because it was so lifelike, and they thought that he had taken a model and had cast the model instead of doing the original work himself. I mean, this is one of his first pieces. And this we have to end on this one. This is called The Kiss. This was also in the gates of hell somewhere. Remember, I told you there were people that were I guess they was, okay, we're here, let's just, this is what we've been doing and we'll just continue. This is his probably the Thinker, The Gates of Hell. This is his most popular work. It features a naked man and woman locked in a candid and a passionate embrace. And as an art historian once said, with sleek and supple bodies which provide a striking contrast to the rough, chiseled rock on which they sit, Rodin's sweethearts appear timeless and idealized, oblivious, just caught up in love. Oh, to be loved like that. It was originally represented as Paolo and Francesca, who were two characters from Dante's Divine Comedy, who fall for each other as they read the 12th century love story of Lancelot and Guinevere. They are discovered in the grip of their romantic reverie by Francesca's husband and Paolo's brother, who stabs them to death. The young lovers are then condemned to wander eternally through the corridors of hell. Now, Rodin, as I said, intended for it to be featured in this Gates of Hell. However, he decided that this depiction of happiness didn't go along with his whole project, so he removed it. And then he transferred it into an independent, beautiful work of art. And I want us to look, since we are going, it's on the we will be looking at faith and liberty and religion. This is his cast of St. John's the Baptist, another one. Now I want y'all to just take a look at this. Marvelous as we kind of zoom in. He's not looking directly at you. He's looking apart. But you can see the dignity, the perhaps resolve of what is to happen to him, all kind of conveyed in this particular piece of work. And this is another one of his just precious, it's called A Woman Kneeling. And instead of, and if you will look at how he has left, this is something, how he's left all the texture, and this is totally goes against, this is Impressionism in stone. Impressionism in stone.
Wow.
Rodin said, man's naked form belongs to no particular moment in history. It is eternal and can be looked upon with joy by the people of all ages. And I think if we've journeyed through this time together this morning, that you can see that. I think hopefully that you have seen that statement fulfilled. I also like this one. He says, sculpture is the art of the whole and the lump. You know, I think it's the Indian wood carvers. When we were out west and went to the glass museum in Tacoma, if you ever get a chance, go to that one. It's just awesome. And one of the tour guides was saying that the wood of the totems speak to them, that they never know what they're carving until they manipulate and I guess live with that piece of wood, and then that lump and that whole becomes something magnificent. And I think as people of religion, as lovers of Christianity, as people who worship, this says a lot. In art, immortality cannot exist. It's
Morality.
Immorality. Thank you, Grady. Grady knows my dyslexia. In art, immorality cannot exist. Art is always sacred. And so when they start with the art, I saw a picture recently that they had, one of the sculptures, they had covered up of strips that covered up the whole body, just left the, you know, and they've they've dressed David in, you know, the art sacred to Rodin it was. And one last thought. This is Lauren Pond, and Lauren Pond is works with the Marty Center's digital Marty Center. And this is a center, I believe it's it's one of the Chicago, either University of Chicago or University of Chicago, one of their divinity programs. And her whole photography, her whole essence of photography is fusing religion, make religion and the real world together. And that's her sense. And that's what she does. She looks at the complexity and tries to photograph religious life. And this is what she said. And I think it just elevates of what we're going as we go on our art walks and our art gallery talks and all the other things we do. When she looks at a piece of work like the cathedral, she says it speaks to the fundamental physicality that underlies religion and its expression. Religion does not just center on ideas about the body. It involves the physical experience of the body. It is embodied. And I thought that was a great way to end our talk. And now we've got a few minutes, and I would love to hear from you guys. So open up and tell me what you think. If you could tell me what you thought, just give me a couple of suggestions, what you thought about the artist Rodin, and if you have seen any of the work and how you felt about it. I'd love to hear. Anyone?
I can't wait to see it, because it's been 35 years since I've seen it.
And it sounds like you were distracted.
Huh?
It sounds like she was
a bit distracted, yes. Has anyone seen any of the work?
distracted.
Has anyone
To see all this in person.
And
Oh, I was just going to say that I don't know if Beth Levitt's still on this call, but she and I have been to the Rodin together, and I just remember standing in front of the gates of hell just forever, just absorbing that. It's just fascinating. And I did have a question though, Sandy. You mentioned that two of the figures were not in agony. Which two?
the last two. That's the reason he didn't put them in the gates of hell. The kiss, the ones that were the kiss.
Oh, I see what
he-
you're saying. Okay.
He had it,
Gotcha.
I think, originally planned and tried to work around, but it just didn't work for it to be
Okay.
in hell. Linda, comment. Primitive.
No, I did see the gates of hell, and I was fascinated, as everybody is. You just stand there and look at torture. Is it really horrible? But I had taken a year of Dante when I was in seminary the first time. That was my self-indulgence. I just loved it. And I guess the only other comment I'm thinking about is, the church uses the term incarnation. It's so where the spirit is embodied is part of our claim that God's spirit was embodied in the Christ. And I think Rodin in particular really gives you this sense of spirit there. And when I think of spirit, I think about movement. So because the spirit's not static. So I think in his sculptures, there's a sense of potentiality about them. It is the moment, and it also invites you into thinking about the next moment. So many other sculptures are so perfect. I'm thinking about the Canova sculptures in Venice, and they're beautiful, and they're perfect. And these seem to be related to real humanity, with the tension in the muscles and the blood vessels visible, and especially the expression. There's no kind of blank face without eyes. These are are human, fully human. And so it makes me want to look for the divine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. I think the Gates of Hell I think I saw them at the National Gallery, but it may have been somewhere else, or may have been the Met. I don't remember.
Well, I appreciate all of you coming, and I hope that even if you don't go on the tour, that or when you go on your tours, that you look at sculpture is it's just different. And when it's, as my former humanities teacher, little tiny bitty thing would say, since when it's done right, it's a step into the real, unknown. And it really was. Catherine's got a few house cleaning things for you, and then thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandy. That was wonderful. Okay, so we've got a lot of events coming up in March and April. March 21st, we're going to have an Art at Noon Zoom with Tim Tuller and Sandy to discuss the Good Friday recital, music and poetry, and I probably will pronounce this incorrectly, La Chemin de la Croix. But then we're going to have a group to meet on Good Friday, March 29th, at the City Grill at 5 o'clock for dinner. And then we're going to attend the Good Friday recital at 7 o'clock at the cathedral. So if you don't want to do dinner, that's fine. You can just meet us there and we'll all sit together. April 3rd, we're going to have a gallery hopping visit to the Comer. There's a special exhibition. We're going to meet there at 11 and then have lunch thereafter at noon. April 10th, we're going to have another Zoom discussion, again, with the wonderful Tim Tuller and Sandy, to discuss Carmen, the opera that will be here in Jacksonville. April 14th, this is sold out, but just a reminder of the folks who signed up. We're going the Carmen matinee on Sunday the 14th, and we're meeting for lunch at BB's at noon. So even if you're not going to Carmen with us, you might still want to listen in on the Zoom call, and if you're going on your own. We also will have some other events that are to be determined for May and June, so stay tuned for that. And then the Philadelphia Art Walk is October 22nd through 26th. And all of these are in the newsletter, and so keep reading it and know what we're doing. And thanks again for everybody for coming and for all of your support of our bookstore ministry. It's really important so we can offer these wonderful programs like the one we had today. So thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sandy. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.